Most people think silence happens when words fail, but that's not true. Silence happens when words succeed, when they reveal something you can't ignore anymore. Because if you've explained yourself enough times, you already know this truth. It was never about clarity. It was about control. There comes a point where you stop asking, "How can I make them understand me?" and start asking, "Why do I need to be understood by someone who keeps refusing?" That shift is subtle, but once it happens, there is no going back. Silence doesn't arrive suddenly, it accumulates. It forms every time your words are interrupted, every time your intentions are questioned, every time your feelings are reduced to overreaction. You don't go quiet because you are weak. You go quiet because your system has learned something. That explanation is no longer communication. It is exposure. When you explain yourself to someone who has already decided your role, you are not sharing information. You are negotiating your worth. And the body knows when a negotiation is rigged. This is why silence feels physical. Your throat tightens. Your chest becomes heavy. Your mind starts calculating whether the effort is worth the cost. That calculation is not emotional. It is neurological. The brain prioritizes survival over expression, and repeated misunderstanding is a form of threat. Not loud, not violent, but destabilizing. Because to be misunderstood consistently is to live without psychological safety. So the mind adapts. It pulls you back. This is where silence begins. The world will tell you that silence is passive, that it means you've given up, that real adults talk things through. But that advice assumes something critical, that both sides are operating in good faith. Explanation only works when there is mutual respect. Without respect, explanation becomes performance. You say more, you soften your tone, you choose gentler words, not because you want to, but because you're trying to be acceptable. And slowly, invisibly, you start shrinking. Silence is what happens when you refuse to shrink any further. There's a reason people react strongly when you stop explaining. Have you noticed? They don't ask calmly, they accuse. You've changed, you're being difficult, you're acting cold. These aren't observations, they are alarms. Because your silence disrupts the dynamic. When you explained, you were predictable, accessible, manageable. Your silence removes their ability to shape the narrative, and that feels like loss. Silence is threatening because it cannot be corrected. There is no sentence they can quote, no tone they can criticize, no argument they can dismantle. Silence gives them nothing to work with. And people who rely on control cannot tolerate emptiness. They need reaction, they need defense, they need engagement. Silence starves all three. Here is something uncomfortable but true. If someone truly wanted to understand you, they wouldn't need repeated explanations. Understanding is not rare, acceptance is. People hear what they are willing to accept. Everything else becomes distortion. So when you explain and still feel unseen, you are not failing to communicate. You are refusing to accept reality. Silence is what happens when you stop fighting that reality. This is why silence feels like relief and grief at the same time. Relief because the struggle ends. Grief because you realize it never had a future. Silence marks the moment you understand that some connections only survive through self-betrayal, and you choose to stop paying that price. This isn't emotional detachment, it's emotional maturity. Children explain to be forgiven. Adults explain to be understood. But self-respecting adults know when explanation has turned into submission. Silence restores hierarchy, not over others, but within yourself. You stop placing other people's comfort above your own clarity. This is why silence sharpens you. Your thoughts become less scattered. Your decisions become quieter but firmer. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. That mental energy returns to you. And when it does, your standards rise without announcement. You no longer argue for space, you take it. People mistake this for indifference, but indifference doesn't ache. Silence does. Silence still cares, it just refuses to beg. Here's a paradox. Silence is often the loudest boundary you will ever set. It tells people exactly where they stand without saying a word. And those who respected you all along will adjust instantly. They won't demand explanations. They won't guilt you into expression. They will feel the shift and respond with care. Everyone else will push harder because your silence confronts them with themselves. Without your explanations, they have nothing to hide behind. No misinterpretation to blame, no confusion to exploit. Just behavior and consequences. This is why silence often comes at the end. It is not a tactic, it is a conclusion. Once you reach it, you don't go back to debating your humanity. You don't re-enter conversations that require you to bleed for clarity. Silence becomes your final language. Not because you want distance, but because you finally understand proximity has conditions. Silence teaches you something explanation never could. That peace does not come from being understood by everyone. It comes from no longer needing to explain yourself to those who never intended to understand you. This is the quiet confidence people feel and cannot name. The stillness that unnerves them. Because silence says, I see clearly now, and I choose myself. That is why silence is chosen over explanation, not as punishment, not as pride, but as self-respect fully formed.